Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is my review for Witches of East End, Season 2, Episode 11, Poe Way Out. And this episode was another great episode. I love this episode, thought it was fantastic, and this episode was more of a building type episode. Nothing really that big happened in this episode. Just build, really, just build. So much plotting going on. Things like that. We got some more flashbacks. We got some flashbacks about Freya in the past. We found out where Joanna, Wendy, and Freya are. I cannot wait for the finale, though. The finale is going to be amazing. We got a 2-hour finale next week, and I personally can't wait for it because it's going to be just epic. You can just tell from this episode that the finale is going to be one that is going to be completely epic. So, let's just get to this episode. So, of course, Joanna, Wendy, and Freya, they went somewhere, and we didn't know where the hell they went. We were all like, Freya, where the hell are we? And we see that scene again, and we see that they go to this ranch, basically. They have traveled back to 1848 Baltimore in search of a rare weapon that can be used to defeat the king. The weapon was used when Joanna had to once, and, that definitely was very interesting. And unfortunately, they have 24 hours to be there, and they can't be longer. They can't be there longer than 24 hours. 24 hours. So I was thinking, why 24 hours? What could happen to them? I think I know why now, but at that point, I had no idea why they would just, why 24 hours? Because it seemed like, I didn't think anything that big would happen in what would happen in 24 hours. I think I know now, but they never actually explain it to us. So, we'll talk about it in a second. But basically, we see that Joanna said she had to kill Freya once, and Freya's obviously very stunned about this, because obviously, Joanna just, almost killed herself because of her daughters. So, of course, when Freya gets this information, she obviously is very upset, because think about it. Joanna, her daughters mean the world to her, and she'd kill her own daughter. It's just, so surprising. We find out why, but, that was definitely very interesting. So, yeah. So, then back in East End, Ingrid is sipping tea with her grandfather. Now, of course, the big question is, why the hell did Ingrid stay? Why? Why did she stay? Basically, at first, it seems like she's bonding with the king. She confides in him about how how lost she feels in the realm, and that was definitely very interesting, because at this point, I'm thinking, why is Ingrid bonding with him? Is Ingrid trying to, does Ingrid have something else up her sleeve here? Because Ingrid was acting different in this episode. She was acting different, especially towards the king. I did not, something was off about Ingrid. We'll talk about why, but we then see, Agent Morrow, Raven. She comes to Dash's hospital, Dash at the hospital and everything, to reveal her true identity to Dash. And she shows up to the hospital, and it looked like that she was going to accuse him of killing Kyle. But she has no idea about this right now. She's more interested in his opinion on the recent murders, of which he has photos, and Dash claims that he has not seen anything like it before, only for one of Raven's underlings to bring up the floater, which hasn't been connected to him as of yet. So, that's really interesting, because there's the whole fact that eventually he's going to have to tell her what he did. He's going to have to tell her, hey, look, I'm the one that did it. You need to know that I'm the one that did it. Because if he doesn't tell her, she's going to find out in the wrong way, and it's not going to be good on his part. So, I don't know what's going to happen to Dash. I hope for his sake he does tell her, but we'll just have to see what happens there, I guess. So, Joanna, Freya, and Wendy make it to the Cat and Shadow, which is a brothel and opium den that they owned and operated. And Freya was, so Joanna decides to, basically, it was, an opium den that Freya was one of the working girls too. And I find it interesting, in every single flashback, Freya's always a bartender. I think that's just something she can't escape. You know, I think that's just her passion and what her purpose is in life. It's just for Freya to be a bartender. So, Freya then gets a chance to marvel at the clothes she once wore, but she soon finds herself forced to hide when past versions of Joanna and Wendy come up to the changing station. And this is a lot like Back to the Future. If they see their past, their past figures, so they could end up changing the entire, show. So, then the topic of conversation, Joanna's increasing dependence on opium now that Victor isn't around anymore. That was definitely very interesting. And, the Beauchamps manage to escape into the stables where they'll be confined until midnight. But Joanna must retrieve the weapon she hopes to vanquish her father, with the reason for the delay is that it's the only way to get the weapon is to wait for past Joanna to use it on past Freya. And, that was really interesting. That's why they have 24 hours. So, as for Dash, Dash is removing the teeth from Kyle's body one by one. It's really weird there. Killian, meanwhile, has, that really weird thing happen. And he still is at that weird doctor, or whatever you want to call it, the voodoo thing. And, we still have Ava's granddaughter there. And he learns of this spell that could break the cycle of heartbreak between him and Freya. Because, remember, Killian does not know that Freya isn't dead. He doesn't know that she's now alive. He still thinks that she's dead. So, he pretty much just wants to do whatever he can to put him out of his misery. So that, he wants to know what he can do because of that. So then, Joanna decides to tell Freya about the incident they're waiting to have happen. So, we then get this very elaborate flashback, which I thought was really well done. In addition to being a working girl, Freya attended bar at the Cat and Shadow, and one day she met a man who tells her about the special demons surrounding him. It was not Killian. The man was not Killian. It was actually one of Killian's past lives, which, I thought this was really cool, was Edgar Allan Poe. Yes, Edgar Allan Poe and Freya in this world had a relationship, and I thought that was really cool, actually, because Edgar Allan Poe, just really famous author then. I really like the way they connected history to this. Who would have known a show like Witches of East End would connect historical events to, a show like this? I never thought that would happen. So, Freya imparts some wisdom on him, and the two flirt to where he wants to come back later that night to see her. So, once they see each other again, she reads his tarot card and unnerves him the closer she gets to the truth. Aside from some biographical facts that she could have picked up through other channels, I gotta say, Freya is extremely sexy and seductive in this world. Like, she talks like this the whole time. Like, she's extremely seductive in the 1800s. So, the two end up having sex. She gets him to give up his real name, which is, as I said, Edgar Allan Poe. And Freya is, of course, beside herself when she learns that she was having an affair with a man who nearly caused her to fail sophomore English. That was really funny. I thought that was really funny when she said that. Because here's the thing with the whole sophomore English thing. I thought that was really funny because, she just wouldn't have ever expected her to have an affair with Edgar Allan Poe. So, Joanna and Wendy assure that the relationship she and Edgar shared was very real and based in feelings. With the poem Annabelle Lee about their connection, they connected that poem to their relationship. But things soon went down from there because, in every single world, Freya and whoever represents Killian can't end up together because something bad always happens to them. Always. And I knew that this was not going to end well. Freya ended up telling Edgar about being a witch and broke the code in which she was supposed to live by. He used that information and every other supernatural tidbit Freya could muster to drive his creative engine, who was the Black Cat, being about Wendy. And eventually he ran out of things to write about. He wrote about so many things here. Supposedly, you know, in Wish of East End world at least, this is what got him to write all those great poems, all those big poems about, you know, why this happened. That's why he wrote things like The Black Cat, The Raven. I thought that was, again, really interesting how they connected that to reality. I thought that was really cool. I didn't expect that, but I thought that was really awesome. So, Edgar then became very broke, turning to alcohol, and he caused Freya to suggest a table turning, which is a parlor game where one is supposed to be able to talk to the spirits, and reluctantly Edgar agrees, only for things to go sideways rather quickly. Because Freya's powers prove to be too good, and when she calls out to the spirits, she's possessed by a puff of blue smoke that calls itself Ambrose Bancroft, who is a very violent spirit who threatens to punish Edgar and kills someone named Rose. So, yes, Freya's possessed at this point, and it was really, like, terrifying. Honestly, it was really creepy. So, Edgar manages to drive Ambrose away, only for the purported murder to linger in Freya's psyche and have an adverse impact on her life and the lives of those she lives. You know, in this world, she can't get rid of this spirit, Ambrose. She just can't. So then we go back to the present in East End, and again, the king is telling Frederick that in order to prepare for Joanna's return, he wants to perform a spell that requires a beating human heart. So to acquire said heart, he uses his vessel to his advantage and turns his face back into Tommy's. So this was a very genius plan. Tommy then goes to the bent elbow, picks up a random girl, gets alone with her, and then talks to her, and he waits till, you know, it's really dark at night, and then he turns it, and then he rips her still beating heart out, and that was really big. That was really big what happened there, and I was like, okay, this is definitely gonna be interesting what happens. So then Dash hears a knock at the door, and it's it's Raven again. And this time, it's on personal business rather than the still open case. It seems that, you know, when she got there, she said, I have a few questions for you. I thought that she was going to possibly, you know, question him, investigation about, Kyle. I thought that's what was going to happen here. But no, they just end up having another tryst. Like, they're just having so many one-night stands and things like that. That's all that's happening here. So, yeah, that's all that ended up happening. They just ended up having sex, basically. So, Killian is then given poison that will scrape the curse from his soul. He doesn't even care about the warnings from Ava's relative about there not being any turning back once he takes the potion. Not when he can't imagine living a life without Freya. You know, he just can't get over her, so drinking this potion and he wants to put him out of his misery. So, meanwhile, Freya learns that her past self strangled 3 people while being possessed by Ambrose, and that Wendy was the one to step up in hopes of curing her niece once and for all, yet Freya proved much too powerful for even someone like Wendy and quickly snapped her neck while the two tangled in a dark alley. And that was a really sad scene to watch. It was so sad to see that Freya would just kill Wendy like that. I thought it was really sad, and I honestly felt really bad for Wendy there. So after discovering Wendy's body, Ingrid managed to wake Joanna from her opium-fueled slumber long enough to get a plan together on how to stop her sister from Killian. By the way, Ingrid and Freya were extremely close in this reality. They're always extremely close, but even closer here. So, there was this wooden box being presented to them in the parlor, and the box is said to rip the intruder from the host's body and throw its soul back into hell. Unfortunately, the host will die as well, meaning that if they use this box on Freya, Ingrid will die as well. So, that's obviously not good. However, Ingrid doesn't care about dying. She doesn't. She doesn't care about dying. She knows she's going to be reborn, and she doesn't want Freya to hurt any more people, so she agrees to the procedure only if Joanna will stop the opium use, seeing as how she's going to need her mother here soon. So, that was definitely very interesting. So then, we see Raven snooping around his house, snooping around Dash's house. I again thought that she was going to, question him and finally say, hey, I'm on to you. But again, they just end up going into anal sex. Like, what? That was just weird when that happened. I understand why this is happening, but, like, eventually he's gonna have to tell her the truth because she's gonna find out and it's not gonna end well there. It's just not. Even if Dash wants it to, it's not gonna end well there at all. So, Killian then decides to take that poison given to him by the witch doctor, and that's the last scene we see of Killian. I don't know what effect this is going to have on Killian, but I do not think this is going to end well. I don't. I don't feel this is going to be something that ends well at all. I am thinking that, you know, there's going to be a lot of, something's going to happen to Killian. I don't know if he's going to die necessarily, but I don't think this is going to end up well. I don't think so. So, then we see something very interesting. Ingrid convinces her, her grandfather that she wants to go to Asgard with him. And before they can go, though, the king tells... so that was very interesting. I'm like, why would Ingrid want to go back to Asgard? I didn't get that. Because, Ingrid just doesn't seem like the kind of person that wants to go to Asgard. So again, something felt off about Ingrid here, and I'll talk about why. However, before they can go, the king tells Frederick that he's going to send Tarkoff after Joanna in order to keep her from procuring the weapons she needs to take them out. So yes, Tarkoff is going after Joanna, Wendy, and Freya. He's going after them, and that is going to be very interesting to see. It was cool to see Tarkoff back in the picture, because we haven't seen Tarkoff since, for a little while, since last week's episode, and it was good to see what Tarkoff's going to do next, because even though I hate Tarkoff, he's a good villain. He's a really good villain, and I really like the dynamic we got here between the King, Tarkoff, and Frederick. I really like that, I like that Frederick doesn't want to be a part of it anymore, and I really like seeing that. So, Ingrid then stops over at Dash's to confess that she's lying to her, and this was really cool, what happened here. Basically, Dash now knows that she's alive, which was a very big scene. You could see that he was very happy to see her, and she then tells him that she's actually lying to her grandfather, which makes sense, because Ingrid would never just go with her grandfather. She would never do that. She would never just agree with what her grandfather is doing. There's no way Ingrid would do that. So basically, she needs his help to dispatch him, to destroy him, and basically to ruin his plans. So they are going against the king. They're going to try to kill the king, but she needs Dash's help. So this is going to be very interesting to see what happens here, and I'm looking forward to seeing that, definitely. I'm especially looking forward to Ingrid telling Frederick, hey, I'm lying. I'm looking forward to seeing if Ingrid tries to get Frederick on her side, because again, Frederick isn't really agreeing with this plan. He doesn't really want to be with this plan, I don't think. So, then we see the last flashback, which is past Joanna and Ingrid lure Freya to Bancroft's grave with the siren song, which was a very creepy song, and Joanna ends up being the one to open the box, thereby separating Bancroft's soul from Freya's body. Bancroft takes the wooden box straight to hell, while Freya just drops dead immediately. Immediately, she just drops dead. I'm not kidding, just drops dead. And then, Freya understands why she did what she did in the present, which makes sense. She knows why she did what she did. She's not mad at Joanna for doing this. She said she would have done the same sort of thing, so she understands why she did it. Joanna says the thing that was the weirdest part was what happened next. Because literally, while she was in the 1800s, present Joanna interrupted their grieving to get the box, and it turns out that Tarkoff disguised himself long enough to get the weapon, presumably to return it to East and end the king's possession. So that's really interesting. So basically, Joanna said that she always knew she would have to go back in time at some point to get that weapon. So that's what Joanna wants to do. She wants to get that weapon before Tarkoff can, because it's the only thing that can destroy the king once and for all. And that was basically how the episode ended. And that was a really awesome way to end the episode. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in the next episode. Now, I will talk about one problem I have with this episode. The flashbacks should have been in this episode, and all the plotting and stuff like that should have been in next week's episode. Because I like the flashbacks, but I felt like we didn't spend enough time on them. That's my only issue with this. However, this was a very good episode. I loved seeing... I'm really looking forward to seeing Ingrid and Dash work together to stop the king. That's going to be really cool to see. Speaking of Dash, he is going to have to tell Raven eventually he was the one that killed Kyle. He just has to, because she's going to find out either way. It's not going to be good for him. It's not going to be good for her either. So, eventually he's going to have to tell her, hey, I'm the one that did it. So, he's going to have to tell her that. Joanna, Freya, and Wendy, it was cool to see all these reveals now. I'm wondering if Freya's somehow going to get possessed again. That's what I'm kind of wondering, because we're going to a 2-hour finale, and I feel that somehow Freya might end up getting possessed again. I just don't feel it could easily just go away. I feel like something else is going to happen where Freya could end up possessed. I don't know, I'm probably dead wrong, but you never know. And also, I'm wondering what's going to happen to them in 24 hours. We'll have to see if it takes longer than 24 hours, what's going to happen to them. Tarkoff destroying Joanna, Wendy, and Freya, him trying to destroy them. That's going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to that final showdown. I know we're going to have, like, a huge battle next week. It's going to be Ingrid, Dash, Freya, Wendy, and Joanna versus Tarkoff, Frederick, and the King. My other question is, does Frederick really agree with what the King is doing? Because the only reason the King went out to get that heart was because he does not trust Frederick at this point. He said to Frederick, oh, you're hopeless. And then that's why he sent out Tarkoff, because he was originally going to have Frederick do that. So I don't think Frederick really agrees with what the King is doing. It just doesn't seem like he does, in my opinion. Killian, I don't know what's going to happen to Killian. I don't think this is going to end up well with this poison. I think something is going to happen to him. I kind of thought maybe Wendy might save him, because Wendy wanted to save Ingrid and Freya last week by giving up her last life. So maybe Wendy will save Killian. That's just a thought. I'm not saying that she would, but maybe she would save Killian. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens there. But, yeah, so overall this episode was amazing. I loved it. I loved this episode. Thought it was very well done. And again, I love the building of this episode. I love this episode again was just build. It's just building up for a really epic finale next week. I'm really looking forward to the 2-hour finale. And, next week, guys, I will try to... Next week, guys, is going to be a crazy week because you got the 2-hour premiere of Homeland, the 2-hour season finale of Witch of the East End and Boardwalk Empire. So, I'm probably going to try to review Homeland and the first part, Witch of the East End, next Sunday. And then I'll review the second part in the morning. You know, I'll try something like that. We'll see what I do. But, that's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys in my next video, which will be my review for tonight's episode of Gotham, which I'm actually really looking forward to. I think this is going to be a better episode. I'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.